The silence screamed louder than any gunshot. It wasn't the peaceful hush of nature, but a thick, suffocating void where laughter should have echoed, where childish shouts should have pierced the mountain air. Whispering Pines, a town nestled deep in the shadowed embrace of the Redwood giants, was holding its breath, choked by an invisible fear. Children were vanishing, not running away, not lost in the woods, but plucked from their beds, from playgrounds, from the very arms of their parents, leaving behind only a chilling emptiness and the gnawing dread of the unknown. Sheriff Brody, a man whose weathered face mirrored the anxieties of his town, stared at the overflowing incident board in his cramped office. Photos of smiling children, now just ghosts in their parents' tear-stained memories, stared back at him. Days bled into weeks, weeks into a terrifying month. Leads dried up like puddles in the summer sun. The whispers started, hushed rumors of a shadowy group, the silent hand preying on the innocent. Whispering Pines, once a haven, was now a cage of fear, its inhabitants paralyzed, their hope dwindling with each sunrise. Into this suffocating atmosphere of dread strode Jax Stone, known to the world as the Rock, but preferring the quiet solitude of Jax these days. He was a force of nature contained in a human frame. His arrival in Whispering Pines was unannounced, unexpected. He wasn't here for fame, for glory, or for a movie role. The weariness etched around his eyes, the grim set of his jaw, spoke of a deeper, personal purpose. Jax carried a weight, a phantom limb of grief that throbbed with every missing child reported on the news. Years ago, a promise made to a dying little girl, a promise to protect the innocent, had become the bedrock of his existence. He'd failed her then, failed to shield her from a world that could be cruel, even to the purest souls. The guilt, a constant companion, fueled his actions now. He parked his vintage Ford Mustang muscle car, a relic of a simpler time, outside the sheriff's office, the engine's rumble a defiant growl against the town's oppressive silence. Stepping out, he was a monument of muscle and determination. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, scanned the faces of the townsfolk who dared to peek from behind curtains, their fear palpable even at a distance. Jax wasn't here to be the Rock. He was here as Jax Stone, a man driven by a ghost, seeking redemption in the eyes of children he hadn't even met yet. He walked into the sheriff's office, the bell above the door a jarring clang in the stillness, and said, his voice a low rumble that resonated with quiet authority, "Sheriff Brody, I'm here about the children." The tachycardia in his chest wasn't from fear, but from the burning urgency that had ignited within him the moment he heard Whispering Pines' desperate plea on a late-night radio broadcast. He had to act, and he had to act now. The silence of Whispering Pines had just met its match. Sheriff Brody, initially wary of the imposing figure who'd just walked into his life, quickly recognized the genuine steel in Jax's gaze. Jax didn't demand, he listened. He absorbed the sheriff's frustrated reports, the fragmented testimonies of terrified parents, the dead-end leads that mocked their efforts. He saw the town's fear, not as weakness, but as a suffocating blanket thrown over justice. Jax started his own investigation, moving with a quiet efficiency that belied his size. He wasn't interested in headlines. He was interested in clues. He visited the homes of the missing children, not to intrude on grief but to observe, to feel the echoes of their presence. He noticed patterns the overwhelmed sheriff had missed, symbols etched subtly near windows, a peculiar type of local wildflower left near each abduction site, signs that pointed to something more organized, more ritualistic than random kidnappings. His inquiries led him to the fringes of Whispering Pines, to the forgotten corners of the Redwood forest, places whispered about in hushed tones by the older townsfolk. Rumors of ancient cults, of dark pacts made in exchange for power, resurfaced from the town's dusty history. Jax, initially skeptical, found himself drawn into the unsettling folklore. He discovered an old, abandoned logging camp deep within the woods, a place locals avoided, claiming it was unlucky. The air here was thick with a cloying sweetness, a sickly floral scent that masked something foul beneath. One evening, while investigating the logging camp, Jax encountered Alara, a young woman who lived on the outskirts of town. She was an outsider, ostracized for her unconventional ways and her knowledge of local herbs and folklore. Initially hesitant, Alara, recognizing the genuine concern in Jax's eyes and the quiet intensity of his purpose, revealed fragments of unsettling truths. She spoke of the Silent Hand, not as mere kidnappers, but as guardians of an ancient pact, sacrificing children to appease something dark and powerful that resided within the Redwood depths, something they called the Root. She spoke of rituals, of blood offerings, of a desperate attempt by the gang to maintain their own twisted power by feeding this entity. Alara became Jax's unexpected ally, guiding him through the treacherous terrain of the forest, deciphering the cryptic symbols and offering insights into the gang's twisted beliefs. She was driven by her own guilt. Her younger brother, years ago, had been one of the first children to vanish, dismissed then as a runaway. Alara had lived with the gnawing certainty that something far more sinister had taken him. She saw in Jax not just strength, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the weight of loss and the burning need for justice. As they delved deeper, they encountered resistance. Shadowy figures lurking in the woods, unsettling signs of surveillance, and once, a direct confrontation with masked gang members who tried to intimidate them away. Jax's strength and Alara's knowledge of the terrain allowed them to escape, but the message was clear. The Silent Hand was aware of their investigation, and they wouldn't hesitate to protect their secrets. The tension escalated, the air crackling, with impending conflict. Jax knew he was getting closer to the lair, closer to the children, and closer to the heart of the darkness that had gripped Whispering Pines. The whispers of the forest were now laced with menace, a prelude to the storm that was about to break. The lair was hidden beneath the abandoned logging camp, accessible through a concealed trapdoor masked by overgrown foliage. Alara, using her knowledge of the forest, located it. The air around the trapdoor thrummed with an unnatural energy, a cold, oppressive weight that pressed down on Jax's chest. This wasn't just a gang. This was something far more sinister. Jax descended into the darkness, Alara following close behind, armed with herbs and a courage born of desperation. The trapdoor opened into a winding, damp tunnel, the air thick with the stench of mildew and something metallic, something akin to blood. The tunnel led to a vast cavern, lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. In the center of the cavern, Jax's blood ran cold. A makeshift altar stood bathed in the torchlight. Around it, masked figures in dark robes chanted in a low, guttural tongue. And bound to the altar, their eyes wide with terror, were the missing children of Whispering Pines. Their small faces, pale and streaked with tears, were a searing indictment of the evil that festered in this place. Presiding over the ritual was a figure cloaked in deeper shadows, his voice booming across the cavern, a voice that resonated with chilling authority. The leader of the Silent Hand. Jax moved with a speed that defied his size, a human avalanche crashing into the ritual. He roared, a primal sound of fury and protective rage, shattering the chanting and scattering the robed figures. Chaos erupted. Masked figures lunged at him, wielding crude weapons, but they were no match for Jax's raw power and focused determination. He moved through them like a force of nature, his fists and feet a whirlwind of righteous fury, disarming, disabling, but not killing. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here for rescue. The leader, enraged, stepped forward, discarding his cloak to reveal a man marked by age and a chilling fanaticism in his eyes. He was Silas, the town's seemingly benevolent elder, a man respected and trusted. His motive wasn't mere power. It was twisted faith. He believed he was saving Whispering Pines from a greater darkness, placating the Root with sacrifices, ensuring the town's continued prosperity, however warped that prosperity had become. He saw himself not as a villain, but as a necessary shepherd, making hard choices for the greater good. Silas fought with a surprising ferocity, fueled by his twisted convictions and a desperate need to protect his dark secret. He was cunning, using the environment to his advantage, but Jax, fueled by the sight of the terrified children, fought with a relentless intensity. He was injured, a deep gash across his arm, but the pain only sharpened his focus. He had to break through He had to reach the children. Alara, meanwhile, moved amongst the chaos, cutting the children free, her gentle hands offering words of comfort amidst the terror. She was the beacon of hope in the darkness, her courage a stark contrast to the fear that had gripped the town. The climax came when Silas, cornered and desperate, raised a ceremonial dagger, intending to complete the ritual, to sacrifice one child in a final act of defiance. Jax, seeing the glint of steel and the terror in the child's eyes, made a choice. He lunged, intercepting Silas, taking the dagger thrust meant for the child. The blade pierced his side, a searing pain that momentarily buckled him, but he held firm, his grip like iron on Silas's wrist. Looking into Silas's fanatical eyes, Jax didn't see pure evil, but a man lost in his own twisted logic, blinded by fear and a misguided sense of duty. And in that moment, instead of delivering a final crushing blow, Jax spoke, his voice raw with pain, but resonating with a profound compassion. This isn't salvation, Silas. This is fear. Children aren't sacrifices. They're the future. And fear will only consume us all. The cavern fell silent, the chanting and fighting abruptly ceasing. Silas, his eyes widening with a flicker of doubt, stared at Jax, at the blood blooming on his side, at the unwavering compassion in his gaze. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a chilling realization of the monstrous path he had chosen. The masked figures, witnessing their leader's defeat, and Jax's unexpected act of sacrifice, faltered, their fanaticism crumbling under the weight of reality. Alara, having freed all the children, rushed to Jax's side, her face etched with concern. The children huddled together, their fear slowly giving way to a fragile hope, watched the scene unfold. The immediate threat was over. The silent hand was broken, their dark ritual interrupted. Sheriff Brody and his deputies, alerted by the commotion and Alara's prearranged signal, arrived, their faces grim as they took in the scene. The masked figures, now disrobed and revealed to be ordinary townsfolk twisted by fear and Silas's influence, offered no resistance. They were as much victims as perpetrators, trapped in a cycle of fear and misguided belief. Silas was taken into custody, his reign of terror finally over. The children, wrapped in blankets and comforted by Alara and the deputies, were led out of the cavern and back into the night air. The sight of them emerging, blinking in the moonlight, was a wave of relief that washed over Whispering Pines. The town, holding its breath for so long, finally exhaled. Jax, despite his injury, refused to leave until he saw every child safely reunited with their parents. He watched as tears of joy replaced tears of fear, as hugs and whispered reassurances filled the night. The emotional release was palpable, a collective catharsis for a town that had been held hostage by darkness. Jax's sacrifice, taking the dagger blow intended for a child, resonated deeply with the community. It wasn't just his strength that had saved them. It was his unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent, his willingness to put himself in harm's way, his compassion even for those who had succumbed to darkness. He had shown them the true meaning of courage, not just physical prowess, but the courage to choose compassion over fear, sacrifice over self-preservation. The rhythm was fast, driven by the urgency of rescue and the raw emotions of reunion. There was no time for lengthy explanations or detailed descriptions. The focus was on the consequences of the climax, the immediate aftermath of the confrontation, and the burgeoning hope that bloomed in the wake of the darkness. Jax, weakened but resolute, had become more than just a rescuer. He had become a symbol of hope for Whispering Pines. The sun rose over Whispering Pines, painting the Redwood giants in hues of gold and rose, a stark contrast to the darkness that had gripped the town just hours before. Children's laughter, tentative at first, then gaining strength and confidence, finally echoed through the streets once more. The silence was broken, replaced by the vibrant sounds of life returning. The immediate conflict was resolved. The children were safe, the silent hand dismantled, and Silas was in custody, facing justice for his crimes. But the scars of fear and trauma remained. Whispering Pines would need time to heal, to rebuild trust, and to confront the lingering shadows of its past. Jax, his side bandaged and aching, prepared to leave. He had come to Whispering Pines seeking a form of personal redemption, and in rescuing these children, he had found a measure of peace. He hadn't erased his past grief, but he had channeled it into something positive, something life-affirming. He had kept his promise, not just to a dying little girl, but to himself. Before leaving, he spoke to Sheriff Brody and Alara. He didn't offer grand pronouncements or heroic speeches. He simply reminded them of the importance of community, of looking out for each other, and of never letting fear dictate their choices. He entrusted the future of Whispering Pines to them, knowing that they, and the newly awakened community, were capable of building a brighter future. As Jax drove away in his Mustang, he glanced back at Whispering Pines, nestled in the embrace of the Redwoods. The town was no longer whispering in fear, but humming with the quiet resilience of hope. He left behind a legacy of compassion and sacrifice, a reminder that even in the darkest corners, the human spirit, fueled by love and a fierce determination to protect the innocent, could prevail. Compassion, sacrifice, and the unwavering power of human love are potent weapons against evil. Jax's journey wasn't just about rescuing children. It was about awakening a community, about reminding them of their own inherent strength and goodness. He left Whispering Pines not as the Rock, the action hero, but as Jax Stone, a man who had faced his own demons and emerged, scarred but resolute, to become a beacon of hope for others. The challenge of fully healing Whispering Pines remained. The scars of fear would take time to fade, but the seeds of compassion and courage had been sown, promising a future where the whispers of the forest would be whispers of peace, not terror. And that, Jax knew, was a victory worth more than any headline, a heritage more enduring than any legend.